you show your face here after what you've do. You've ruined the family name. I cannot believe you brought this disgusting mess here. You have ruined everything.
Get off my property. My voice cut through the morning air like a knife. Now. The woman in the crimson blazer didn't even flinch. She stood in the middle of my vineyard, clipboard in hand, surrounded by workers unloading white chairs and a massive floral arch. Behind her, a catering truck was parked on my irrigation line. Excuse me? She lowered her sunglasses, revealing eyes that had perfected that look of disdain over years of HOA board meetings. This is a community celebration space. We filed the proper permits. I walked closer, boots crunching on gravel. I'd laid 3 summers ago. Lady, I don't care what permits you filed. This is my vineyard. Those are my vines, and that truck is crushing my drip irrigation system. She smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Mr. Chen, I'm Linda Ashford, president of Sunset Ridge HOA. We've determined this unused portion serves as a buffer zone between our community and your agricultural activities. My daughter's wedding is tomorrow and everything's approved. Approved by who? By me. That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war. 3 months earlier, I'd found survey stakes in my vineyard, orange flags cutting through 15-year-old Cabernet vines that were just hitting their prime. I'm James Chen, 3rd-generation winemaker. My grandfather bought these 60 Napa acres in 1987 when you could still be Asian in wine country without people assuming you didn't belong. Now, I make Cabernet that wins awards and costs more than most monthly mortgages. For 38 years, we respected boundaries. Then Linda Ashford moved into Sunset Ridge Estates, luxury homes marketed as wine country living, where people want the backdrop but complain about the smell of fermentation. She'd been filing complaints for 5 years. Noise violations, water usage, visual impact of my equipment, every complaint dismissed. But when I found those survey stakes, I knew she'd escalated. The county clerk showed me the paperwork. Sunset Ridge HOA filed for a boundary review. They're claiming this section is community space based on historical use. Historical use? My hands were shaking. Not from anger, from fear. I prune those vines every week. You'll need documentation. I spent that night pulling records. Harvest logs, soil tests, irrigation schedules. Every piece of paper proving I'd worked that land continuously. Then I hired Maria Gonzalez, property rights attorney who'd fought corporate land grabs. She reviewed Linda's claim and laughed. James, this is absurd. You pay taxes on it. You actively farm it. She has no case. Then why does my stomach hurt? Because she's betting you'll give up before she loses. She was almost right. Over 2 months, Linda filed motion after motion, each dismissed. Each costing me money and time I needed for bud break, the most critical season. I was 48 hours from losing my spring crop when the phone rang. Mr. Chen? Brad with Elegant Events? Confirming venue access for tomorrow's setup. My blood went cold. What venue? Sunset Ridge Community Space. The Ashford Wedding. That's my vineyard. We were told it was HOA property. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. She was doing it anyway. Setting up a wedding on land she'd already lost legal claim to. Maria's words echoed, people like Linda don't care about winning legally. That night, I barely slept. I sat on my porch watching the moon over vines my grandfather planted, thinking about what this land meant. Not just livelihood, proof we belonged here. By dawn Friday, the first truck arrived. White rental van rolling through my gate like they owned it. I grabbed my phone, started recording, walked down. 2 men unloaded chairs. Sir, please step back. We're on a schedule. You're on my property, I said, keeping my voice level. Without permission, he blinked. We have a contract, Miss Ashford assured us. Miss Ashford doesn't own this land. I'm James Chen. The owner. He looked genuinely confused. We've got $50,000 worth of setup. The wedding's tomorrow. Then you better call Miss Ashford and ask why she lied. More trucks arrived. Florists, caterers, a DJ, all with the same story, all confused, all making urgent phone calls. Then Linda's white Mercedes pulled up. She climbed out in designer jeans and that red blazer. Her daughter Emily followed, looking embarrassed. The groom trailed behind. "James," Linda called cheerfully. "Perfect timing. Can you show them the setup area?" "Linda, send everyone home. This is private property." She laughed. "Don't be ridiculous. The HOA board voted this as community event space. The board can't vote on land they don't own. The boundary review determined was rejected 3 weeks ago. You were copied on the decision." Her smile faltered, then recovered. "Miscommunication. But we have a wedding tomorrow. 200 guests. Venue costs $85,000. Surely we can work something out?" "Work something out?" I couldn't believe it. "You tried to steal my land. When that failed, you scheduled a wedding anyway. And now you want to negotiate?" Emily stepped forward. "Mr. Chen, I didn't know." "Emily, be quiet," Linda snapped. She turned back to me, mask dropping. "Fine, play hardball, but every vendor here is witnessing you obstruct a legal event. That's actionable." Let me be clear. I stepped closer, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. "One chair on my property, I call the sheriff. 1 tent stake in my ground, I file criminal trespassing charges. If you think I'm bluffing, test me." We locked eyes. Behind her, workers had stopped. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "No, Linda. You made the mistake when you thought you could push around the quiet Chinese guy next door." She stormed to her car. Emily gave me an apologetic glance. They drove away, tires spitting gravel. The vendors slowly packed up. I felt bad for them, but this wasn't my problem. By noon, everyone had left. The vineyard was quiet except for wind through the vines. I called Maria. They just tried to set up anyway. Video? Every second. Good. Filing for emergency restraining order now. The judge granted it within 2 hours. But I knew this wasn't over. I spent Friday fortifying my property line. Temporary fencing, signs, cameras. Hired Marcus, retired sheriff's deputy, to patrol overnight. "Man," he said, "I've seen crazy HOA stuff, but a wedding on someone else's land?" Friday night, I barely slept, checking cameras. Saturday morning broke clear and warm, perfect wedding weather. I made coffee, sat on my porch, waited. At 8 a.m., Officer Reyes called. "We've received a report you're blocking access to a public event." "Officer, there's no public event. I have a restraining order granted yesterday." He checked. "You're right. If she filed a false report, that's a problem." An hour later, he showed up, reviewed everything. "Want to press charges?" "Not against the vendors, but Linda Ashford?" "Yes." Around 2 p.m., Marcus called. "Boss, you need to see this. Cars line the road outside my gate. People in wedding attire setting up chairs. In the road, blocking Silverado Trail. We're guests of the Ashford wedding," a man explained. "Since you blocked the venue, we're having it here." In a public road, deputies arrived. Started writing tickets. That's when I saw her. Linda, with a megaphone. "This is a peaceful protest. We're protesting discriminatory land use that prioritizes agricultural greed over community values." She'd turned her daughter's wedding into a protest. Against me. In the chaos, Emily stood crying while her groom tried to comfort her. I walked over. "Emily, I'm sorry." She looked up, mascara running. "Mr. Chen, I didn't know Mom was planning this. I thought we had an actual venue." Linda appeared. "Emily, don't talk to him. Mom, this is insane. My wedding is ruined." "Your wedding will be beautiful once we get access." "There is no venue, Mom. You lied. You tried to steal someone's land, and now everyone knows." Linda's face went white. "I was doing this for you." "No, you were doing this for you, like everything else." Emily grabbed her groom's hand. "We're leaving." They drove away. Linda stood in the middle of the road, her protest crumbling, her daughter gone. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. The story went viral by morning. HOA president's wedding protest blocks trail. By Tuesday, CNN. Wine Country Karen tries to steal Vineyard. Our spring release sold out in 48 hours. Waiting list hit 2,000 names. I should have been happy. Instead, I felt exhausted. Wednesday, Emily knocked on my door. I wanted to apologize for everything. Did you have your wedding? She smiled sadly. Courthouse, yesterday. Just us. It was actually perfect. I'm glad. Mom resigned from the HOA. Dad's filing for divorce. After she left, I walked the vineyard. Spring growth coming in strong. Maria called. County filed criminal trespassing charges. Linda's facing 6 months. Her lawyers are negotiating. A week later, I got a handwritten letter. Mr. Chen, I'm writing to apologize. I convinced myself I was acting for the community, for my daughter, but it was about control. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I understand what I did. Linda Ashford. I folded it, put it in my desk. Not to treasure, to remember. But 3 weeks later, Maria called with news that changed everything. James, we need to talk. In person. She showed up looking worried, first time I'd seen her rattled. Linda's lawyers found something. My stomach dropped. What? A county permit application from 2018, filed by the previous HOA president. It's vague, but it requests consideration of the land as potential community recreation space. I felt the world tilt. That was 7 years ago. Her lawyers are arguing it shows good faith belief the land might be available. They're pushing for dismissal of criminal charges. And James? She looked me dead in the eye. They're saying if you don't drop the civil suit, they'll countersue for more. Claiming you cost Linda her marriage, her reputation, her relationship with her daughter. I sat down hard. So, she might walk? Criminal case is weakening. Civil suit is still strong, but it goes to trial, which means months more. I put my head in my hands. I can't do this, Maria. What? I can't do months more. The spring frost came. I lost 15% of my crop because I was in depositions instead of running smudge pots. My sleep's destroyed. My blood pressure's through the roof. And for what? You want to settle? I want my life back. We sat in silence. Wind moved through the vines with that sound I'd known my whole life. What would you tell another farmer in your position? Maria asked quietly. I'd tell them to fight. Then why aren't you taking your own advice? Because I'm 48 years old and I feel 80. Because I'm wondering if winning legally is worth losing everything else. She stood. If you settle, Linda gets to say the 2018 permit justified her actions. Every farmer dealing with HOA pressure will hear that and give up faster. That's not fair. Neither is what's happening to you. But the question is whether you can live with walking away. After she left, I walked to the section Linda tried to claim. The vines were leafing out, new growth reaching toward the sun. I ran my hand along the wire trellis, feeling the roughness. This land had been in my family 38 years. My grandfather worked it until his hands bled. My father defended it through droughts and crashes, but defending it was killing me. That night, I called my sister in Seattle. James? May answered, voice thick with sleep. It's 11 p.m. What's wrong? I'm thinking about selling. Silence. The vineyard? I'm exhausted, May. They found some permit from 7 years ago that might make Linda look reasonable. I'm starting to think Dad was wrong when he said this land was worth any price. Dad never said that. He said the land was worth protecting. That's different from any price. He also said you had to know when to rest and when to fight. Which is this? I don't know, did he? But I know you. You don't quit things. You spent 2 years learning Mandarin just to talk to Grandpa before he died. You rebuilt the irrigation by hand. If you quit now, it won't be because you're tired. It'll be because you're scared. I am scared. Good. That means you're sane. But being scared and being defeated aren't the same thing. After we hung up, I sat until dawn, watching the sky lighten. By sunrise, I'd decided. I called Maria. I'm going to trial. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Those 2 weeks before trial were hell. Late spring frost came 3 nights in a row, temperatures dropping to 29 degrees. I spent every night in the vineyard running smudge pots, desperately trying to keep buds alive. The smoke burned my eyes until they watered constantly. The cold seeped into my bones. My hands cracked and bled from the dry air and constant work. On the 3rd night, Marcus found me sitting in the dirt at 3 a.m., surrounded by smoking pots, crying, not sobbing. Just silent tears while I stared at vines that might not make it, tears I couldn't even feel because my face was numb from cold and exhaustion. Boss. He sat beside me in the mud. "Talk to me." "I don't know if I can do this," I said, voice hoarse from smoke and screaming at the sky earlier when another thermometer dropped below freezing. Trial starts Monday. I've lost 20% of my crop because I've been fighting instead of farming. I'm running on 3 hours of sleep a night when I'm lucky. My blood pressure is so high, my doctor threatened to hospitalize me, and I keep asking what's the point? Even if I win in court, Linda doesn't go to jail. She pays a fine she can probably afford from selling that Mercedes, and I've lost an entire season, my health, every ounce of peace I had. So why keep fighting? Because if I don't, she wins, and every person like her wins. Every HOA president who thinks their clipboard is more powerful than someone's property deed. Every entitled neighbor who sees land and thinks, "I want that," without considering who owns it, who works it, who built their life on it. That's a good reason, is it? Or am I just too stubborn to admit I've already lost everything that matters? Look at these vines, Marcus. 15 years I've been nurturing this block. 15 years of pruning and training and protecting. And 3 nights of frost might kill them because I wasn't here. Because I was in depositions and courtrooms instead of doing my actual job. Some defender of the land I turned out to be. Marcus pulled out a cigarette, lit it, took a long drag. The orange glow lit up his weathered face. My dad was a farmer. Tobacco, down in North Carolina. When I was 15, the county tried to rezone his land as residential, told him he had to stop growing, that the smell bothered the new neighborhood spreading out from Charlotte. He fought for 3 years. Spent every penny we had on lawyers. Lost eventually, they eminent domained him right out, paid him half what the land was worth. He died 6 months later. Heart attack. I always thought it was from the stress. I'm sorry. Don't be. You know what he told me 3 days before he died? I was sitting by his hospital bed, and he grabbed my hand and said, "Marcus, I lost the land, but I didn't lose myself." I stood up. I fought back, and that's what matters in the end. Not winning, standing. I didn't understand it then. Thought he was just making excuses for throwing away our family's future, and now? Took me 20 years to get it. But yeah, I believe him now. Because you know what I remember about my dad? Not that he lost. I remember that he didn't back down. That he stood in front of those county commissioners and told them they were wrong. That he fought until he had nothing left to fight with. That's what I tell my kids about their grandfather, not that he was a good farmer or made money, that he stood up when it mattered. He stubbed out his cigarette in the mud. You're gonna lose some vines, James, maybe lose most of this block, maybe lose this whole season's revenue, maybe even lose the trial despite being in the right, but you won't lose yourself. You won't lose the knowledge that you stood up when someone tried to take what was yours. And that's worth more than any vineyard, any harvest, any amount of money or peace of mind. The frost finally broke on the 4th night. By dawn, I'd walked every row in that section, assessing the damage with a heavy heart and a notebook that kept getting wet from the dew, or maybe from tears I couldn't admit I was crying. 22% of the spring crop gone. Just gone. Blackened buds that would never become shoots, never bear fruit. The surviving vines were stressed, leaves curling at the edges, looking fragile and vulnerable in a way that made my chest tight. It would be a smaller harvest, lower yields, lost revenue at a time when I was hemorrhaging money on legal fees. But we'd make it. Barely. I walked into that courtroom on September 15th looking like someone who'd been through a war, lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. My suit hung loose on my frame like I was a kid, wearing his father's clothes. Dark circles under my eyes so pronounced that the bailiff asked if I needed medical attention. My hands had a tremor I couldn't control. Maria took one look at me and winced. "James, you look like someone who spent the last 2 weeks fighting a losing battle against the weather while preparing for a trial that might destroy me financially even if I win." I was going to say human. For the first time since I met you, you look human instead of like some untouchable Zen farmer who never breaks. That might actually help us. The jury needs to see that this has cost you something real. The trial started with Maria laying out our case: trespassing, fraud, interference with business operations. Straightforward, clean, backed by video evidence and documentation that should have made it an open and shut case. Then Thornton stood up, and I saw the trap we'd walked into. "Your Honor, members of the jury," he began, his voice smooth and practiced. "My client made a mistake. I won't stand here and tell you she didn't. But it was an honest mistake based on official county documents that suggested, however, incorrectly community use of the disputed property. Miss Ashford believed in good faith that she was acting within her rights as HOA president to facilitate community events. Mr. Chen's response, while perhaps legally justified, was disproportionate, vindictive, and ultimately far more damaging than the original error. He pulled up a slideshow. Photos of Emily crying at the courthouse steps, Linda's resignation letter from the HOA, her husband's divorce filing, news articles about the HOA president's fall from grace, a timeline showing how quickly Linda's life had unraveled. One woman's mistake, one error in judgment based on a 7-year-old permit application that she genuinely believed gave her community use rights, has destroyed an entire family. Miss Ashford has lost her marriage of 23 years. She's lost her daughter, who won't return her calls. She's lost her position, her reputation, her social standing in this community. She's currently under psychiatric care for severe depression and anxiety, and Mr. Chen wants $250,000 on top of that destruction. I ask you, where does punishment end and vindictiveness begin? I felt the jury shift. Faces that had been sympathetic to me suddenly looked thoughtful, uncertain. One woman in the back row was already dabbing at her eyes. Suddenly, I wasn't the victim defending his property. I was the aggressor who destroyed a woman for a simple mistake. The first witness was Paul Martinez, the county surveyor, stern-faced, professional, carrying himself with the authority of someone who'd done this job for 30 years. He confirmed that the boundaries were clear, that my property line was exactly where I said it was, that there had never been any ambiguity. But, under Thornton's cross-examination, the certainty started to crack. "Mr. Martinez, you mentioned a 2018 permit application in your initial report. Can you explain what that was?" Martinez shifted uncomfortably. It was a request filed by the previous HOA president, asking the county to consider designating certain parcels adjacent to Sunset Ridge Estates as potential community recreation space. And did the county respond to this request? The file shows it was received and reviewed, but not approved. Not approved, but also not explicitly rejected, correct? The lack of approval is an implicit rejection. Please answer the question, Mr. Martinez. Was there a letter sent to the HOA explicitly stating your request is rejected? Long pause. No. There was no explicit rejection letter. So someone finding this file, someone who wasn't an expert in county bureaucratic procedures, might reasonably believe the request was still under consideration? I suppose if they didn't understand how the process works, could someone reading this document reasonably believe the county was considering community use of the property in question? Martinez hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw our case start to crumble. If they didn't read it carefully and didn't understand county procedures, possibly. Thornton smiled. Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Nothing further. That possibly was all he needed. Suddenly, Linda's actions weren't fraud, they were an understandable misinterpretation of bureaucratic ambiguity. Next up was Brad Stevens from Elegant Events. He testified about Linda's instructions, about being told the property was HOA-approved community space, about her refusal to stop the setup even after I'd informed her it was private property. But under Thornton's cross, the narrative shifted again. Mr. Stevens, when Miss Ashford told you to continue with the setup despite Mr. Chen's objections, did she seem malicious? Did she seem like someone who knew she was breaking the law? Brad thought about it. She seemed stressed, really stressed, like someone who was panicking, like a mother watching her daughter's wedding fall apart. Objection, Maria called. Leading the witness, sustained, rephrase, Mr. Thornton. What was Miss Ashford's emotional state when she instructed you to continue? She was definitely not calm. She kept saying things like, "This has to work, and I can't let Emily down, and we'll figure out the paperwork." It felt more like desperation than whatever you'd call intentional wrongdoing. The jury was eating it up. I could see it in their faces. Linda was no longer the entitled HOA tyrant. She was a desperate mother trying to give her daughter a special day. The afternoon session brought Emily to the stand, and I knew this would be the moment that would either save or destroy our case. She walked to the witness box wearing a simple blue dress, her face makeup-free, looking younger and more vulnerable than when I'd seen her at the protest. When she was sworn in, her hand trembled visibly. "Miss Morrison," Maria began gently, "can you tell us about the wedding planning process? My mother planned everything. I just showed up where she told me to." Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Did your mother ever mention that the venue was on Mr. Chen's private property?" "No. She said it was a beautiful community space that the HOA had secured for events. She showed me photos and talked about how perfect it would be. Rustic, scenic, exactly what I'd always dreamed of. When did you learn the truth?" Emily's voice cracked, and tears started flowing freely. "The day before the wedding, when Mr. 90, Chen's attorney, served the restraining order and vendors started calling to say they couldn't set up, Mom told me he was just being unreasonable, that he'd get over it, that we'd work it out. I believed her because she's my mother. Why would I think she was lying? How did you feel when you realized what had actually happened?" "Devastated, humiliated. My mother had tried to steal someone's land for my wedding. She'd lied to me, to vendors, to everyone. And when it all fell apart, instead of admitting she was wrong, she turned it into a protest and made everything so much worse." "Objection," Thornton called. "Speculation about my client's motives, sustained. Miss Morrison, stick to what you directly observed. Did your wedding happen as planned?" "No." Emily wiped her eyes. "We got married at the courthouse 2 days later, just us and 2 witnesses. My dad didn't come because he and Mom were already fighting about the divorce. The groom's parents didn't come because they were so embarrassed by the whole thing. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and instead I spent it crying in a courthouse bathroom, wondering how my mother could do this to me." "Are you close with your mother now?" Emily looked directly at Linda for the first time, and the pain in her expression was visceral. "No, I haven't spoken to her since the day of the protest. She's tried calling, texting, showing up at my apartment, but I can't. I can't look at her without remembering that she was willing to steal from someone, to lie to me, to destroy everything for some perfect Instagram moment that mattered more to her than actually caring about what I wanted." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. "No further questions," Maria said softly. Thornton's cross-examination was calculated and cruel. "Miss Morrison, you're clearly very angry at your mother. I'm hurt. There's a difference. Hurt enough to testify against her in a way that could cost her hundreds of thousands of dollars?" Emily's jaw tightened. "I'm testifying to the truth. What it costs her is her responsibility, not mine. But isn't it possible that your anger is coloring your testimony? That your mother's actions, however misguided, came from a place of love, from wanting to give you something beautiful? Love doesn't involve stealing from people. Love doesn't involve lying." Love doesn't involve turning your daughter's wedding into a circus because you can't admit you were wrong. Your mother is currently under psychiatric care. Did you know that? For severe depression and anxiety related to losing her family? Objection. Maria was on her feet. The witness isn't qualified to. Withdrawn. Thornton turned back to Emily. Do you feel any responsibility for your mother's current mental state? Emily's face went pale. Are you asking if I feel guilty that my mother destroyed her own life by trying to steal land for a party? No, I don't. That was her choice, not mine. Even though she's told the psychiatrist she's contemplated suicide? The courtroom gasped. Maria objected again, but the damage was done. The jury had just heard that Linda was suicidal, and Emily, the daughter who'd cut her off, showed no remorse. After Emily stepped down, there was a recess. In the hallway, she approached me, her face wet with tears. Mr. Chen, I'm sorry. I know that last part made me look cold, but I can't. I can't take responsibility for her choices. I can't. You don't have to apologize for telling the truth. My therapist says I need to set boundaries, that I can't let her guilt me into accepting behavior that hurt me just because she's suffering the consequences now. But it's hard. She's still my mother. Boundaries are important. Sometimes they're the most loving thing you can enforce. That's what my therapist says. It doesn't feel loving, though. It feels like abandoning her when she needs help. And there it was, the gray zone. Emily wasn't cold or heartless. She was a daughter torn between protecting herself and feeling guilty for her mother's pain. Linda wasn't a simple villain. She was a woman who'd made terrible choices and was now suffering genuine consequences that hurt everyone around her, including herself. The next morning brought the protest footage, and I thought this would be our moment of vindication. Officer Reyes testified about the road blockade, the citations issued, the traffic disruption, the chaos. Maria played cell phone footage from multiple angles, showing Linda with the megaphone directing people to link arms, telling them to hold the line, positioning the event as a protest against my discriminatory land use practices. Some jurors shook their heads at the footage, but others looked thoughtful. One older woman was nodding slightly, as if she understood the desperation that would drive someone to such measures. Then, Thornton brought out his surprise weapon. Dr. Patricia Ramos, a clinical psychologist specializing in stress-related disorders and crisis intervention. Dr. Ramos, you've evaluated Miss Ashford at the request of her defense team. Can you describe her current mental state? Doctor. Ramos spoke in the measured clinical tone of someone who testified in court many times. Miss Ashford is suffering from severe anxiety with panic attacks, major depressive disorder, and symptoms consistent with PTSD related to the events surrounding her daughter's wedding and the subsequent public humiliation. She's experienced significant life changes in a short period divorce, estrangement from her daughter, loss of her social position, financial instability, and intense public scrutiny. She's currently on medication and has been hospitalized twice for psychiatric emergencies. When you say psychiatric emergencies, Miss Ashford has expressed suicidal ideation on multiple occasions. She's currently under suicide watch protocols with her treatment team. The courtroom went dead silent. I felt my stomach drop. Whatever moral high ground we'd occupied suddenly felt shaky. Maria's objection was immediate and heated. Your Honor, this is blatant emotional manipulation. The witness is trying to make the jury feel sympathy. It's relevant to the question of damages, Thornton countered smoothly. My client has already been punished far beyond any reasonable measure. The question before this jury is whether to add $250,000 in damages on top of a woman who's already lost everything. The judge allowed it, and I watched the jury's faces transform. Suddenly, Linda wasn't just a woman who'd made mistakes. She was a victim of disproportionate consequences, someone whose life had been destroyed over what could be framed as a simple misunderstanding about a 7-year-old permit. During the afternoon recess, I found myself in the courthouse bathroom again, hands shaking as I splashed cold water on my face. My reflection looked like a stranger, gaunt, hollow-eyed, aged beyond my 48 years. A juror walked in. I recognized him from jury selection, man in his 60s, weathered hands, the kind of calluses you get from working land. He saw me and paused. "You're the Vineyard guy." "Yeah." He washed his hands in silence, the only sound the running water and the distant echo of courthouse hallways. Then, without looking at me, my HOA tried to fine me $2,000 for having a work truck in my driveway, said it lowered property values, violated aesthetic standards. I told them they could take their fine and their aesthetic standards and shove them both where the sun doesn't shine. Sometimes you gotta stand your ground, even when everyone says you're being unreasonable. He dried his hands and left without another word. I stood there, staring at my reflection, thinking about those words. Even when everyone says, "You're being unreasonable." Was I being unreasonable? I had video evidence, documentation, legal right. But I also had Emily's guilt, Linda's suicide watch, and a jury that was starting to look at me like I was the villain. On day 3, Linda took the stand, and I knew this was where the trial would be won or lost. She looked nothing like the power-suited HOA president who'd stood in my vineyard demanding access. The red blazer was gone, replaced by a simple gray dress that hung on her now thin frame. No makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, eyes that looked haunted and lost. "Miss Ashford?" Thornton began with practiced gentleness. "Can you explain what you were thinking when you scheduled your daughter's wedding on Mr. Chen's property?" Her voice was soft, almost fragile. "I just wanted to give Emily something special. The venue she'd originally wanted was booked solid for the entire year. I was desperate to find something that would make her happy, that would give her the day she'd dreamed about since she was a little girl. When I found the 2018 permit application in the old HOA files, I genuinely thought we had some basis for using that land. I thought if I just talked to Mr. Chen, explained the situation, he'd be understanding. And when he refused, I panicked. Tears started flowing freely. I'd already put down deposits, signed contracts, spent $85,000. Emily was so excited. And I thought if I just went ahead with it, if Mr. Chen saw how beautiful it could be, he'd realize it wasn't hurting anyone. It was stupid. It was wrong. But I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just a mother trying not to disappoint her daughter. Do you regret your actions? Every single day. She looked directly at me now, and the pain in her expression seemed genuine. "Mr. Chen, I am so sorry. I destroyed my own family trying to control something I had absolutely no right to. I cost you money and time and peace. I turned what should have been a simple conversation into a legal nightmare. And now everyone's paying the price. You, me, Emily, everyone. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. I just want you to know that I understand now what I did. I see how wrong it was. It was a good performance if it was a performance. But watching her, I found myself wondering if maybe it wasn't. Maybe this was just a person who'd made catastrophically bad choices and was now drowning in the consequences." Maria's cross-examination was sharp and unforgiving. "Miss Ashford, you testified that you found the 2018 permit application in April of this year. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And when did you receive the county's rejection of your boundary review?" "March." "So you knew the county had already ruled that the land was Mr. Chen's property when you found this 7-year-old document, correct?" Pause. "Yes." "Did you contact the county to ask if the 2018 permit application was still relevant or valid?" "No." "Did you consult with a property attorney before scheduling a major event on land you'd already been told wasn't yours?" "No." "Did you tell any of the vendors you hired that you were basing your claim to the property on an unapproved permit request from 7 years ago?" "No." "So, you made a series of assumptions that happened to support what you wanted to do and proceeded without any verification. Is that accurate?" Linda's composure began to crack. I wanted to believe that we had some right to the land. I made a mistake. You've apologized repeatedly in this courtroom. Very emotional, very moving. Apologies. But did you apologize to Mr. Chen before he filed suit? Before you were facing legal consequences?
No.
I know. Did you offer to pay for the damage your vehicles caused to his irrigation system?
Reimburse him?
No. Did you offer to reimburse him for the time he spent dealing with your trespassing? No. Did you acknowledge any wrongdoing before you were caught and facing public humiliation? I was trying to protect my reputation. Exactly. Maria's voice was like ice. You weren't sorry for what you did. You were sorry you got caught. You weren't apologizing for trespassing and lying. You were apologizing for the consequences. There's a difference, miss. Ashford. The jury's expressions shifted again, but I couldn't tell which direction they were leaning. Some looked angry. Some looked sad. Some just looked confused and exhausted, the way I felt. Closing arguments came on day 4, and by then I was running on pure adrenaline and stubbornness. Thornton went first, painting Linda as a tragic figure brought low by a cascade of consequences that far exceeded her original error. Ladies and gentlemen, we all make mistakes. The question before you today isn't whether Miss Ashford made a mistake. She clearly did. The question is whether the punishment has already exceeded the crime. She's lost her marriage, lost her daughter, lost her position in the community. She's under psychiatric care. She's contemplating suicide. And now Mr. Chen wants $250,000 on top of all that. At what point does justice become vengeance? At what point do we say, enough? Maria's closing was surgical but measured, and I could tell she was walking a careful line. Members of the jury, we all have sympathy for Miss Ashford's current situation. No one wants to see a person suffering. But let's be very clear about how we got here. Miss Ashford made a choice. She had months to make this right. Months to apologize, to compensate Mr. Chen, to acknowledge her error. She chose not to. She chose pride over principle. She chose to escalate rather than apologize. She chose to turn her daughter's wedding into a protest rather than admit she'd been wrong. Those were her choices, and choices have consequences. She pulled up one final image on the screen, my vineyard at sunset, rows of vines stretching toward the mountains, the light catching on leaves that had somehow survived frost and stress and neglect. This land has been in the Chen family for 38 years. It's not just property, it's legacy. It's proof that immigrants belong here, that hard work matters, that the law protects everyone equally, not just the powerful, not just the well-connected. When we allow people to take what isn't theirs because they're sympathetic, because they cry convincingly in court, because we feel bad about their mental health, we lose something fundamental. We lose the promise that your property deed means something, that boundaries aren't suggestions, that rights aren't negotiable based on who can generate more sympathy. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours where I sat on a bench outside the courtroom, unable to eat, unable to think, just watching the clock tick forward while Marcus sat beside me in silent solidarity. When the bailiff finally called us back in, I felt like I was walking to face a firing squad. Bob Thompson, the jury foreman, the man with the weathered farmer's hands who'd spoken to me in the bathroom, stood to read the verdict. He looked at me once, his expression unreadable, before turning to the judge. On the charge of trespass, we find for the plaintiff, Mr. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't breathe. On the charge of conversion of property, we find for the plaintiff. On the charge of interference with business operations, we find for the plaintiff. Every single count. We'd won on every count. Damages awarded to plaintiff, $127,000 for demonstrable financial losses, $50,000 for legal fees and costs, $35,000 in punitive damages. Not the $75,000 in punitive damages we'd asked for. The jury had split the difference, acknowledging wrongdoing but tempering it with mercy. $212,000 total instead of $252,000. On the defendant's counterclaim for emotional distress, we find for the defendant, Mr. Chen, counterclaim dismissed with prejudice. Judge Morrison banged her gavel once, the sound echoing through the silent courtroom. Miss Ashford, you are hereby permanently restrained from entering Mr. Chen's property or contacting him directly by any means. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and criminal contempt charges. We're adjourned. Linda sat completely frozen, her face blank. Not defeated, not angry, just empty. Like someone who'd finally run out of fight. Outside, the courthouse steps were swarming with reporters, cameras, microphones thrust forward like weapons. I gave the briefest statement I could manage, my voice hoarse and cracking. This wasn't about revenge. It was never about revenge. It was about protecting what's mine. Property rights matter. Boundaries matter. And when you make a mistake, when anyone makes a mistake, you own it immediately. Not after you're caught, not after you're sued, not after your daughter cuts you off. You own it right away. That's what being an adult means. That night, I drove back to the Vineyard in silence, too exhausted even for music. The sun was setting as I pulled in, painting everything in shades of gold and amber that would have been beautiful if I'd had any capacity left to appreciate beauty. I walked to the section Linda had tried to claim, ran my hand along the wire trellis, feeling the familiar roughness of metal and tension. The vines were recovering from the frost damage slowly, painfully, but recovering. Sparse foliage, smaller clusters than usual, but alive, surviving, like me. Marcus found me there as the last light faded. You won. Yeah, you don't sound happy about it. I'm relieved. But Marcus, I spent 8 months of my life on this, lost a quarter of my crop, aged 10 years, nearly had a heart attack from stress, and yeah, I won. I proved that Linda was wrong and I was right, but I don't feel victorious. I feel tired. So incredibly tired. You did more than prove Linda was wrong. You proved that quiet people can stand up and fight back. You proved that boundaries matter, that property rights matter, that you can't just take what you want because you're powerful or well-connected. I know all that intellectually. But right now, standing here, looking at vines that might never fully recover from the frost, looking at empty spaces where clusters should be, adding up how much this cost in every possible way. I'm not sure the cost was worth the principle. And that's a terrible thing to admit after winning. He sat down in the dirt beside me, and we both just stayed there in silence, watching the sky darken and the first stars appear. The temperature dropped as night came on, and I remembered all those nights running smudge pots, fighting the frost, crying in the darkness. Your grandfather, Marcus said eventually. Would he have fought? Probably. He was even more stubborn than I am. Would he have regretted it? I thought about that for a long time. I don't know. He used to say something. The land endures. People don't. We're just temporary caretakers. Maybe he meant we're not supposed to win everything. We're just supposed to stand for something while we're here, even if it costs us everything. That's some pretty heavy philosophy for a Friday night. That's exhaustion talking. The harvest came right on schedule despite everything. October 3rd, 2025 at 4:47 a.m. when the first light touched the eastern hills. Reduced yield down almost 30% from normal, but the quality was exceptional. Stress sometimes makes better wine, concentrating flavors, intensifying character. The crew moved through the rows under the rising sun, their practiced hands gentle with clusters that had survived so much. Despite everything, the legal battle, the frost, the stress, the exhaustion, the routine felt healing. The rhythm of harvest, the smell of crushed grapes, the sound of bins filling with fruit. This was what mattered. This was why I'd fought. That evening, I opened a bottle from 2019, the year before the war started, when life was simpler, and poured glasses for everyone who'd stayed to help. To 2025, I said, raising my glass, the year we survived. They cheered and drank, and for the first time in 8 months, I felt something that might eventually become peace. For the first time in 8 months, I felt something close to peace. 3 weeks after harvest, I was closing the barrel room when I heard a car. Linda stood by my gate. She looked different, thinner, hair shorter, dressed simply. No red blazer, no clipboard. Just a woman at the end of something. We stared at each other. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said. "I just needed to see it. The land I tried to take." "Why?" "Because I need to understand what I was willing to destroy for a party that didn't even happen." She looked past me at the vineyard, rows heavy with new growth. Crush pads still damp from harvest. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. I never actually looked at it. I just saw empty space I could use. I never saw what you see. And what do I see? Legacy, continuity, proof you belong here. She turned back. I destroyed my family for control of something I never understood. My daughter won't speak to me. My ex-husband remarried. My entire social circle disappeared, all for a piece of land I didn't even need. Linda, don't. She held up her hand. I don't want forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I see it now.
I'm sorry.
What I did, what I took, wasn't just land. It was dignity, and I'm sorry. She walked to her car, an older Honda, not the white Mercedes. Before getting in, she turned. Your grandfather would be proud. Not everyone fights when the world says surrender. Then she was gone. I stood there long after her taillights disappeared, watching the last light fade. The 2025 vintage turned out exceptional. 2 years later, critics called it my finest work. Some joked about notes of justice. I called it honest. Linda moved to Arizona, started working at a plant nursery. Emily had a baby, a daughter named Sophia. She sent me a birth announcement. Thank you for teaching me that love means boundaries. I framed it next to Linda's apology letter. Not as trophies, as reminders. My vineyard thrives. The vines she tried to steal are my most productive. Every spring when I prune that section, I remember. Not with anger, with understanding. The land endures. People break. Sometimes the cost of standing firm is everything. But you do it anyway. One afternoon, an older Asian man knocked David Liu from Paso Robles. His HOA had been restricting his harvest schedule. I was going to sell, he said. Then I read your story. And I decided to fight. We talked for 2 hours. I gave him Maria's card, shared documentation process, told him the truth about what it would cost. It'll be hell, I said. You'll lose sleep, money, peace. You might lose crop like I did. Are you ready? He smiled, tired but determined. My grandfather bought that land in 1952. I'm not giving it up because some bored president doesn't like the smell of grapes. After he left, I walked the vineyard. Sunset turning everything gold. This was the real victory, not the verdict. This, proof that one person standing firm gives everyone permission. The land teaches patience. The vines teach resilience. The fight teaches you who you are when everything else is stripped away. On 60 acres in Napa Valley, in 2025, I learned all three. And though the cost was higher than I imagined, I'd pay it again, because some things are worth more than peace. Like knowing that when you look in the mirror, you see someone who stood when the world said surrender. That's worth every sleepless night, every lost vine, every moment of doubt. The land endures. And so do we.